So in my previous video you have already understood section 31, and that is regarding invoice. When the invoice is required to be issued, in that we talked about subsection 1 to subsection 7. Now why did we talk about section 31? Because for determining the time of supply as per section 12 and 13, the date of invoice is very important. In both the sections, section 12, 13 as well as 14, we are going to talk about that. That's why I covered up section 31 in the beginning. Now in this video, I'm talking about section 12, that is time of supply in relation to goods, right? And in addition to goods, this section also covers time of supply in relation to vouchers. So two things are main. One is in relation to goods and then in relation to vouchers, right? So section 12, this is time of supply for goods. Okay. Now as I said, broadly this section is talking about that tax becomes payable at the time of supply. This is subsection 1. So tax becomes payable at the time of supply, right? Now in this section, broadly we have two things. One is in relation to goods and another is in relation to vouchers, when vouchers are issued. Okay. Now in relation to goods, again it is divided in two parts, whether it is a case of forward charge or it is a case of reverse charge, right? Now you can put subsection numbers. This is subsection 1, this is subsection 2, this is subsection 3, this is subsection 4. Okay, so this way you have complete structure of section 12. I'll start with the vouchers, so you have little extra time to write on about that. So in relation to vouchers, what is the time for issue? So the first question is whether supply is already identifiable when the vouchers are issued, or it is not identifiable. So you can have a specific supply from a specific place against the voucher, then we say that the supply is identifiable. But voucher is redeemable against any article and at a number of places, then another situation. So first is, if supply is identifiable, then date of issue of voucher, this itself becomes the time of supply. So we have a voucher, supply is specific, place is specific, and you can also say that date may also be specific therein, right? That this voucher is redeemable at this and this place for this article by this date. Then we say that supply is identifiable. Otherwise, date of redemption of voucher. So where the supply is not specific, it is not identifiable, then time of supply is the time of redemption. So I said some vouchers are given and it is not known against which article and where it is going to be redeemed. In that situation, the time of redemption is the time of supply. Otherwise, where supply is specific, then the time of issue of voucher itself is the time of supply. And what is the meaning of time of supply? That is written in subsection 1. The tax becomes payable at the time of supply. Right? So this is about the vouchers. Now, if it is a reverse charge, what is the time of supply? In relation to that, we can say, number 1, date of receiving goods, the date on which goods are actually received, right? Number 2, date of making payment, date of making payment, right? Or debit in bank account, debit in bank account. And then we have third thing also, number 3, 30 days since date of invoice. So we have 3 parameters, and out of the 3, earliest of the 3, so this I am writing here, just saving some space. So earliest of the 3, that is the time of supply. But where none of these are identifiable, we have another situation given, and that is the date of making entry in the books of account of the recipient. So here I am writing or. So or becomes applicable only when this is not possible. This is entry in the books of account. Entry in the books of account of recipient, right? So these are actually receiving, that is one thing, and entry in the books of account, that is another thing. Goods received today, entry in the books of account maybe on the same day, maybe later. So that's why these are different. So either actual date of receiving or the date of making the debit entry in the bank account, or number 3 is 30 days from the date of invoice. And out of the 3, whichever comes earliest, that is the time of supply. And if that is not possible to determine, then comes last thing, the date on which entry is made in the books of account of the recipient. When it comes to forward charge, first option given is date of invoice or latest date for issue. That is first case, right? Another situation, this is date of receiving payment And now we have two things. Out of the two, we can say whichever is earlier. Out of the two, whichever comes earlier, that will become the time of supply. Right? And this is something, or rather there is something extra when the additional payment accrues because of either interest or late payment fees or some kind of penalty. That is covered in subsection 6. So that I am not adding here. So that will be subsection 6, which I'll cover up later on. So this says either date of issue of invoice or the date for the latest date for the issue or date of receiving payment. Here comes a note. right? So actual supply may be before or later, but this says supply is deemed to have been made. Supply is deemed to have been made to the extent it is covered by invoice or payment, right? Now this note is very important. There may be a situation where the invoice is issued, payment is received and supply is to be made later. Actual supply has not been done. So in that situation, you can ask a question, when the actual supply has not been made, how come the tax becomes payable? So this note is an answer to that, that to the extent it is covered by invoice or payment, the supply is deemed to have been made, right? So this says, in case of forward charge, what is the time of supply? Either actual date of invoice or the latest date by which the invoice should have been issued, otherwise date of receiving payment, right? I hope this you have already taken a note, right? If you have not taken a note, press the pause button, take a note, because I am proceeding further, right? Now there is another note, note number 2. When we say payment, payment means what? Payment means entry in books of account or credit in bank account whichever is earlier. So that is the time of payment. Okay, so forward charge, either date of issue of invoice or last date for the issue of invoice, otherwise date of receiving payment, and out of the two whichever comes earlier. Then we had note number 1, which says that to the extent a supply is covered in invoice or the payment that is deemed to have been made, and payment received, because this is talking about the payment. Payment means what? Payment means either entry in the books of account or credit in the bank account, whichever comes earlier, right? So once again have a look, because I need to write something more here. Now as far as vouchers are concerned, what is the time of supply? So if the supply is identifiable, then date of issue of voucher itself is the time of supply. But where supply is not identifiable, the time of supply will be the date on which that voucher is redeemed. In case of goods, if it is a reverse charge, then the recipient is required to pay the tax. Then the date of receiving the goods or date of making payment to the supplier. Making payment means it is in the bank account, debit in the bank account. Or number 3, 30 days from the date of invoice. Out of the 3, whichever comes earliest. And if all 3 are not possible, then it says entry in the books of account of the recipient. That is the time of supply. And if it is a forward charge, then date of invoice or the last date thereof, or the date of receiving the payment, whichever is earlier. And payment means entry in the books of account or credit entry in the bank account, whichever comes earlier. Right, that is the time of payment. Now in this section,